Eva, it's always my intention, not always, but when I'm talking to people like yourself, when I had Kavork on last week, Kavork Omasi on, and out of habit, I say, "How are you?" Even though I know, and I get on people when they do that, like, are you an asshole? Like, obviously, you know how they're doing because of the work they're covering. And so I did that with you offline, and I caught myself. I'm like, oh, I don't mean to be that guy to ask you how you're doing because I know what's everything going on right now. But how are you managing? How are you managing everything?
It's frustrating is an understatement, but I'll use that. It's frustrating to see the genocide of minorities in Syria unfolding, and not be, just like as we saw the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza for over 1 year by Israel, and not be able to stop it. And also the parallel of the videos are being put out, are coming out, some by Syrians who are able to leak the videos out of Al-Qaeda, Julani, who's going by Ahmed al-Shara now. His terrorists are slaughtering minorities, primarily Alawites, but also Shia and Christians, and also Sunnis, by the way. And the numbers, of course, are being downplayed in Western corporate media. They'll say hundreds or maybe 1,000, and in fact, it's at least 10,000. I've seen reports that it could be 20 or 30,000 Syrian civilians who've been executed in the last week alone. This is not even including the last few months, because the point should be made that this started in December after Al Qaeda took Syria, after Assad was ousted, and the world bizarrely recognized Julani, Abu Muhammad al-Jilani was the name he went with, and he was in ISIS, he was Al Qaeda, and suddenly the world recognizes him as the president of Syria. Now he's reformed apparently, which he isn't, of course, and I'm sure you're following that. But immediately after that, the persecution of minorities began, and first they were being humiliated, or they were being driven out of their towns. Like, for example, the ancient Christian town of Malula. Um, Christians there, Syrians there were fearing being persecuted. That town actually was occupied for 8 months from September 2013 I think it was April 2014. Anyway, and I went there 2 months to the day after it was liberated from the various terrorist factions. So, but it's history repeating itself with not only with Malula but around Syria. Um, and the persecution, as I said, began. So they were being humiliated, but they were also being killed in the streets, in their homes. So I make this point because the way media is spinning it, if they deign to even talk about it, is they say, well, this is their and they justify executions in the streets, which is just unthinkable. You know, can we justify that in a Western nation? Well, he stole, oh, he was part of a crooked government, for example, they will say. And so that's justification for shooting someone in the head in the street or slitting their throat. And that's precisely what's happening in Syria and has been since Al Qaeda took over in Syria. Um, but since March 7th, the intensification slaughter on steroids began in Syria. And Julani's terrorists have been going to coastal regions and slaughtering entire families, slaughtering entire villages, apparently. I mean, it's hard to get all the information coming out because there are media blackouts, internet blackouts. So it's difficult to know the extent of the massacres. That's why we say the numbers could be 20,000, could be 30,000, because locals who live in the region are saying, I know of this village, but we can't say how many are killed there. We know most in the village were killed, and this is all throughout the coast, and not only the coast. I have a dear friend who I don't know at this moment if he's alive or not. I communicated with him 2 days ago, and he's disabled now because he was injured during by the terrorist some years ago, maybe 8 years ago. So it's difficult for him to walk because he lost his legs, and he he's surrounded. He has to keep leaving and going to a different district or into the forest or in the field, anywhere so he can be out of the place he lives if the terrorists sweep through. And this is the climate people are living in. You have other people who um are resigned. They're like, we're staying in our home. If they come and kill us, they have their faith, whether they're Christian or Muslim, and some people have just decided we're not going to leave our home, and plus they know it's futile to try to flee. That said, I think it's like at least 8,000 Syrians have fled to Lebanon to escape the terrorist. So it's just back to your question. It's overwhelming to see this play out in live time. And I should mention, I said the videos are being leaked by Syrians who are able to film it or film and leave Syria, or however it's being leaked. But they're also being posted and boastingly so by the terrorists themselves, who are just bragging and so proud of the fact they're slaughtering civilians. They make no effort to hide it. They're so happy to be slaughtering civilians, and they're determined to slaughter more. They're determined to ethnically cleanse Syria of Alawites, and then they say to the Christians, "You're next." So, with all that context, pretty shitty. And I know you know that, and it's not about me anyway. It doesn't really matter. But the thing is, it's just you spend all this time thinking like, how can we change this? And it's not in our hands. It's in the hands of Western leaders, really, to pull the plug on the terrorist, or Turkey, or the Gulf states, to say, okay, Julani, rein them in, or whatever the ultimatum is. But they're clearly not going to do that. So we sit and watch, and Syrians are pleading for help. They're saying, please stop this genocide. They're begging for help. And then back to what I was saying about the media is like, well, this is just a suppression of an uprising, because there is still a pocket of Syrian resistance who are saying, we're not letting these terrorists take our land, although the terrorists already have. We're going to defend our people. So they're resisting, a very small pocket, but it's their duty and right to do so. And because they were resisting the months prior to March of Syrian civilians being slaughtered, imprisoned, tortured, etc., then the media says, well, what's happening in Syria is just infighting, or what's happening in Syria is the security is just cleaning up. And then they won't say these are resistance. They'll say the Syrian people who are defending themselves are terrorists, just like Israel calls Palestinians who are defending themselves terrorists. And so the media is going with that, or they're saying, no, what's happening is they're going after so-called Assad remnants. But I don't know how closely your audience is following this, but again, even if we go with the modest estimate of 10,000 Syrian civilians slaughtered in 1 week, you see the videos, their entire families. There are young people who wouldn't have been a part of the army. There are elderly who wouldn't have been a part of the army. There are women. There are infants, for fuck's sake. There are children with their necks slit and with bullets to the head. And the media is saying, well, these are Assad remnants. So it's staggering, and it's still going on. People say Julani on, I think it was March 10th, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was, said, okay, our operation, quote unquote, is over. We're pulling people back. He only did that because the United Nations sent some sort of observers to the coast. And while the United Nations sent observers to the coast, the terrorists were taking bodies and dumping them into valleys, in forest, into the sea, or burying them. You see videos of bulldozers covering up a pile of bodies. Thereby denying the Syrian families at least the right to bury their loved ones. I mean, it's just obscene, the level of degradation of humanity that these terrorists are doing. The media is enabling. So, and even in spite of Julani saying that, he just moved the massacres elsewhere, and it's still going on now. So the media is like, okay, well, it's all over. 100 people killed in 1 week, a few hundred people killed. No, it's like 10,000. And also people are saying there might be 20,000 Syrians missing. So where are they? Are they dead? Are they in prison being tortured? We don't even know. And there are other reports of women being taken as captives. So presumably sex slaves. So it's just, like, I don't even want to give the caveat, I don't care what you think about Assad, but this was not happening under Assad's rule. And another trope is that, well, Alawites were always suppressing Sunnis in Syria, and that's not true. Sunnis held top positions in the Syrian government. It's just, this is all literally CIA propaganda. And the CIA, by the way, has been trying to overthrow the presidents, Hafez al-Assad before Bashar al-Assad, for decades. And they even had a 1986, I think, report or note or whatever saying the best way to overthrow Hafiz al-Assad is to ignite sectarian strife. And they wanted to see strife, sectarianism, fighting between Alawites and Shias and Sunnis. And they wanted to back Sunnis. And by the way, I do want to give a caveat. I'm not saying this is all Sunnis who are doing this. The terrorists are takfiris with extremist brainwashing from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, from Turkey. The terrorists include, I don't know the percentage, I think someone said 40% are foreign. I don't know if that's true. But anyway, there's a huge number of foreign terrorists in Syria now, claiming Syrian land as their own and slaughtering civilians. And then even Hillary Clinton, there were emails leaked from her, or her emails were leaked rather, in 2012. And it was a very similar thing to the 1986 document about sectarian strife. Very similar wording, like this will lead to the overthrow of Assad and will benefit Israel if there's the Sunni Shia sectarian strife. Sorry, I kind of strayed there for a second because I want to make a point about Sunnis. So I was saying not all Sunnis support this sectarian takfiri terrorism. Some do. But there are Syrians in Syria who've been slaughtered. There's a Sunni sheikh from Damascus, I don't remember his name. He was killed, I think it was last week, because he spoke out against this ethnic cleansing of Alawites. So they came for him and shot him in front of his family. And he was Sunni. And even back in 2016, on one of my visits to Aleppo before it was liberated, a Christian Reverend Ibrahim Nasir introduced me, to, I think it was 3 different Sunni sheikhs who he knew in Aleppo, and they were all being hunted down by the terrorists. They were on death list, kill list from the terrorists. And the reason was they had not endorsed this sectarian garbage rhetoric, and they weren't allowing it in their mosques. And so for that crime, the terrorists had them on kill list. So I mean, I'm just sorry, a very long answer to your question, but it's pretty damn crazy that we're watching this, another genocide, smaller scale than Gaza for the moment, but it is going on now, and they're crying out for help. The only Syrians that are relatively safe now are the 6,000 or 7,000 that are taking refuge in Russia's Hmeimim airbase and are being protected there. But the rest of Syrians, again, not only Alawites, but of any sect that do not support what Jolani's goons are doing, are at risk of being slaughtered.
Why do you think the Western media is remaining so silent on this?
Because they don't care. Well, 2 things. Why were they always taking the propaganda of the terrorists as 100% legitimate throughout the war in Syria from 2011 on? The Western media, its function in whatever conflict or political issue let's say conflict is, in my opinion, to do the backing of the US, Israel, and allies. It will always take the opposite side of truth. And I've seen it firsthand in Syria, in Palestine, in Venezuela too. So they're like an echo chamber for Washington. And you sometimes see either slip-ups, they accidentally, or in Ukraine as well, they accidentally record someone saying, no, we want the Russian army to come liberate us, for example, or a journalist in Crimea trying to, push the Russian invasion of Crimea stuff. And this was last year. I don't remember the media agency or the country, but this journalist was apparently trying to do that. And he was met with, no, we were waiting to join Russia or come back to Russia or something like that. So my point is you get moments where there's an element of truth in the media, but by and large, they're there to serve the agenda of forwarding the lies. So with Syria, since 2011 on, they were pushing the whole peaceful revolution. It was never a revolution. It was never peaceful in Syria from day one narrative. They were pushing the chemical weapons narrative. They were pushing the brutal dictator narrative, like they did with Gaddafi, like they did with Putin. So I think there could be honest elements within the media who don't agree with that, but stick with it because it's career or whatever. You have other people like, there was a German journalist who died, I think in 2014, but he worked for, he was a journalist for some, I forget which, I don't know if it was Der Spiegel or one of the main German medias. And he admitted many years after the fact, he said, I was lying. They gave me narratives. I said what they wanted me to say because I got perks and bonuses and all that. And he said, and every journalist in this kind of profession, corporate media is doing the same. So I think that's probably why. It's just ironic though, because I have focused so much on Syria and spent so much time there. I remember so many instances wherein there would be an instant there would be something happen which is comparably far minor compared to what's happening now in Syria, the massacre of civilians. Again, the huge numbers of civilians slaughtered in just 1 week. But there would be something that would happen, and then all of the media would say, oh my God, we have to intervene in Syria. Okay, here's a perfect example. Amran Daknish, a boy who was, gosh, how old was he? Sorry, I'm forgetting if he was 7 or what, but he was a young boy in Aleppo with his family in an area that the family actually supported the Syrian Arab Army, and they were surrounded by terrorists. So because I interviewed the father the year after. So basically what the media said in 2016 was, oh my goodness, oh my God, Amran Daknish is traumatized. Look at this boy in the ambulance. He's just so shocked. He doesn't know what to do. He's been traumatized. He's gonna die. Look what Russia and Syria did to him. And in fact, it was the terrorist who shelled their house, caused a minor injury on Amran, but it did cause him to bleed. Hence the scene. They were able to put him in the ambulance and take the photos and say, this is the face of suffering of Syria. I don't know. Did we talk about this story? Because it's actually a very poignant story.
I don't think so.
So the poignant part is he was rescued by, of course, the White Helmets. His family didn't know. Basically, what the father told me 1 year later was that they were in the home. There was an explosion of some sort. He said, I did not hear an airplane because that was the narrative. The media in tandem. You've seen these collage videos where one person's saying like a talking point and the next journalist, and then the whole like square of journalists talking is saying the exact same talking point. It was like that. The next day in tandem, all corporate media had Amran Daknish's face in an ambulance. He was a cute boy, and blaming Russia of airstriking the house. Some said Syria did it. And the father said there was no airplane. They would know when you hear the airplane. He said there was no airplane. There was an explosion. It went dark. We went to the safest room possible. And then I couldn't, I tried to bring all my family into this room, and I realized Amran was missing. So they took Amran. They used him as a photo opportunity. And then his face was splashed as the face of human suffering. But the guy who took his photograph, later it was learned that he was buddies with this terrorist group, Nuruddin al-Zinki. Now, as you know, there are many terrorist groups in Syria backed by different countries and having different ideologies, but they all committed the same heinous crimes. So this Nuruddin al-Zinki group, I think it was 1 or 2 months prior, had slowly and methodically beheaded a Palestinian youth. He was 12 or 14, Abdullah Isa. They cut his head off. He was begging for them to shoot him in the head. And they did that. And there's a photo of one of the terrorists of the Zinki gang holding this boy's head. And the guy that took the photo of Amran was not just friends with people in Nuruddin al-Zinki, he was friends with those exact terrorists that sawed off the head of Abdullah Isa. Then a month or two later, they staged this incident with Amran, and he gets many interviews because he's taken a prize-winning photograph. And he literally says, I think it was to the Telegraph or one of the British newspapers, or probably many of them, he said, I cry for children like Amran. And so Amran was mildly injured from a shelling from the terrorist. And this dude who took the photograph was buddies with child head choppers. And the media ran with that. And then when Amran's father spoke out a year later, I was in Aleppo, and a journalist there had said, Eva, I think Amran and his family are still in Aleppo. I said, Khalid, can you help me find him? I want to interview him. I know I spoke to the Syrian Ministry of Information woman, and she said, no, they're not here. I said, well, I'm told they were here. She said, no. And then that day, actually, very coincidentally, the father spoke to media, to Syrian media mostly. And so I went back to the Damascus Ministry of Information. I said, I need to interview that boy, or that father of the boy. The boy's too young to give an interview, but he was there. I saw him. And so they said, okay. And so I went and I interviewed the father, and he told his story, which is 100% opposite what the corporate media said. But again, I'm sorry, that's a very long-winded example. But the point being, that was an example of an incident that occurred that garnered the attention, concern, indignation of the entire world, pretty much. And that was used as a pretext for further intervention in Syria, like a no-fly zone or boots on the ground kind of thing. And yet, as I was making the point the other day, like, and yet here we are watching a genocide unfold with Syrians begging for help. And the world's just like, well, you know what? We think Ahmed al-Shara should investigate the situation. We've told him he needs to, you know, reprimand the people that did these acts. Well, he's responsible for the slaughter of civilians in Syria. So, like, how fucked up is that? It's
Well,
like asking Israel to investigate itself for the genocide of Palestinians.
well, and the other thing too, what is the end game then? I mean, balkanization is the goal here, right? To break up Syria into smaller states, and Turkey, Israel, the United States, Russia, right, would all take some type of piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, I Russia has its base there. I suppose when you say Russia and a piece of it, Russia wants to maintain its base there, but Turkey definitely wants the north, and Israel definitely wants the south. Israel wants the whole bloody area of Syria and beyond. They want into you know about the Greater Israel Project. They want expansion, expansion, but that does seem to be the plan, the Balkanization. And it's just, when I used to go to Syria, if you asked most Syrians, like, are you Christian? They'd be like, Ana Suri. Are you Muslim? Ana Suri. Yeah, someone else. Inti Alawi? Ana Suri. They'd always say, I'm Syrian, because that was their identity, was like, they're Syrian, we coexist, we celebrate one another's holidays, we intermarry. And so now, in just a few months, well, over the course of the year, over the course of the war on Syria since 2011 on, the sectarianism from without has been pushed upon Syria with this end goal of dividing up the country, as you've said. And now they're achieving it, not because the Syrians, okay, there are some Syrians that wish this, but the majority don't. But what can they do to stop it?
Well, and I was just reading before we jumped on here that the United States and Israel are intentionally remaining silent. Although I've heard Marco Rubio comment a little bit on it, but because they're not intervening because so this balkanization can take place.
Yeah.
Am I accurate by saying that?
That would be my understanding. The point I was maybe going to make, but didn't before when you asked about the media. And then I gave you that long-winded example of when the media does care and when the world is outraged and there's indignation. It's when it's a narrative that they've created and they can use to their own. The media can pump out, and the West, NATO, Washington, Tel Aviv can use to their own benefit. And so I think I wanted to make the point too, like in when they cried for Syrians, or when they said the Syrian quote unquote regime is starving civilians in Aleppo, in Madaya, in Al-War, in blah, 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 blah. It was always the terrorists that were actually in control of the food and aid that made it in and were starving the civilians. But the crocodile tears flowed. Or this Amran example I gave, I remember a CNN blonde anchor crying crocodile tears and stuttering as she tried to pronounce whatever she was saying. When she didn't give a shit about Syrian. I'm sorry if I'm swearing a lot, but I'm pretty pissed off. She didn't give a shit about Syrian civilians, and corporate media don't either. Nor do Western politicians that would also crocodile tear about Syrian civilians when something they orchestrated to accuse the Syrian government or the Russian government happened. So now I've lost track of what you're saying about Marco Rubio kind of speaking out about it, but I mean, apparently Lindsey Graham is saying what's happening is terrible, but he was a cheerleader for the terrorists. The thing is, they wanted this to happen. So if they're saying any sort of sweet words now, it means nothing because this is exactly what they wanted.
Even on the media side, I did hear Clayton Morris on Tucker Carlson gave you a shout out, which was really I thought was
Hmm.
really cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not hearing a lot on the alt right about this. I mean, him, uh, none of the big platforms, not that I've heard.
About Syria.
Yeah, talking about bringing any type of awareness to this.
Yeah, I actually should look at, well, I mean, I haven't looked at various platforms to see what they're saying. I'm just struggling to keep up with what's coming out of Syria, to be honest. Actually, but Clayton, and yeah, I'm grateful to him for that shout out. His shout out was actually about my documentation of Ukraine's use of the Min Lepestok, the petal mines in the
Oh,
Donbass.
that's true. Okay, so
So
yeah, I get that confused
yeah,
for a
yeah,
second.
but I'm glad he said that because so that's an issue that I have been covering because I was in Donetsk when Ukraine fired the shells containing the petal mines, and I think you and I have talked about this before. But they continue to maim civilians. So now it's 173 civilians, 11 of whom are children, who have been maimed to some degree by these mines, whether losing a hand or a foot or the lower leg, whatever. And three of the civilians died of their wounds. So these are such insidious things that Ukraine was obliged to destroy under the Ottawa Treaty, I think. And they're still injuring civilians. And now war correspondents in liberated areas of Kursk have recently found, I forget which city, but anyway, they found that the area is heavily littered with these petal mines. So also again from Ukraine, but media won't talk about that. Human Rights Watch actually did a report, and they said it seems that Ukraine has used these mines in Izium, an area that was, I think, I forget the chronology, but I think it was at a time that Russian forces were there, which would make sense, that Ukraine would fire them there, but there were also civilians living there. But Human Rights Watch said nothing about Ukraine's firing of these petal mines onto Donetsk and Gorlovka and Makivka and regions around the Donbass. So
Yeah,
that's why I was happy that Clayton said that to Tucker Carlson because while I'm not a groupie of Tucker, he does have a big platform, so it's good that that was mentioned there.
and for people that are going to email me because I got it wrong, I spaced out. So yes, it was he was talking about Ukraine, but I got confused with Syria for a second. So I'm sure I'm going to
That's
get
okay.
some hate for that. People are so funny, right? How like passionate and venomous sometimes they can with emails when you get something wrong.
Oh, I know.
Which I find it interesting because it's like, all right, we're having a conversation here. Okay, it's like you're not going to get everything right, which I just but it's how everybody can Monday morning quarterback the when you get something wrong.
Oh, I know. For example, some days ago, I was on RT. It was like, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 minute interview. And I had a lot I wanted to say, as you can see. And so I was very explicit in saying slaughter, genocide, ethnic cleansing regarding what Al Qaeda, what Jolani's terrorists are doing in Syria. But at one point, I said something like, the fighting needs to stop. And that's what somebody came on my Facebook and was like, it's not fighting, it's ethnic cleansing. I'm like, I fucking know that. I said it like a zillion times. At some point, whoop, fighting came out. And obviously, that's not what I meant, but it came out. I'm human. Sometimes things burp out by mistake. But that people I I'm like, dude, like listen to the whole interview. You'll hear I said ethnic cleansing, genocide, and slaughter far more times than the one or maybe two times I mistakenly said fighting. So I hear you is my point.
Do you think it's because of the state of the times that we're in though that people have become so like passionate and get so like angry when they hear like one of us make a mistake or something like
It could be, but then the interesting thing is without naming names, but there are a number of personalities on X, for example, that have built their built up their platform by clearly buying hundreds, thousands, millions of followers. Because that is possible. I don't know how to do that. I'm not interested in buying followers. And I never have or will. But anyway, there are people on X, for example, who do that. And part of there are some characters whose grift is to pick fights with people. Now I get it. It's one thing to say like this person is deliberately lying and I'm going to call them out for that. That's one thing. But these grifters will be like they'll just pick fights in order to have like, ha ha ha, look how I owned him kind of thing. That's what some of these grifters were doing before, and then they bought their followers, and now they have a big following, right? Presumably, but most of the followers are fake or bots or whatever. But the point being, people cut them slack if they get something wrong, or if they flip flop. Trump's good, Trump's bad, Trump's my president, Trump's a liar. Like literally, there are people that do this. Like every 2 weeks or 2 months, they have a totally different position. Or they'll be like, pardon my language, this is not me, but they'll be like, you're a faggot. It's just like, I really don't care what your opinion of. I'm not woke or anything, but like, how juvenile is that to go around calling people faggots? It's just like, you can have your opinion of these particular issues, but that's your shoot down, is to call someone a faggot. And this happens all the time by these characters, and then other people are like, oh, it's okay, he's just young. So back to your point, it's like, we get flack for maybe making a mistake once in a while, maybe wrong lexicon or a little glitch, Boop, oops, I thought it was about Syria. It was about Ukraine. That's nothing. But there are people that are constantly wrong about information, or just vulgar and obtuse and disgusting. And people they don't care. They're like, no, it's okay. It's just so bizarre. So I don't get why people who are sticklers for us to be perfectly correct all the time aren't sticklers for other people to be decent human beings.
Yeah, and the whole obsession with Trump. I mean, I'm getting to a point where, I mean, we were talking about that offline a little bit. Like, he's a savior. He's a savior. He's going to fix everything. And you've seen that on the alt-right media too. Not with everybody, but you're like the big platforms. Golden age. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to get fixed. It's like, I thought we were in this space for accountability for everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think he's a savior. I'm not seeing that so far.
Their savior just bombed Yemen last night multiple times. I've seen different statistics on how many civilians were killed. I don't know if they're accurate, but as many as 31 civilians could have been killed last night by Trump's bombing Yemen.
What were your thoughts when you first heard about that yesterday?
I mean, Yemen has taken what's the word I'm looking for? An honorable stance in defense of Palestinians. And for that, Israel's attack dog Trump. I know it works both ways. Israel controls Trump, or Trump controls Israel. I can definitely see the argument for both. But anyway, Trump, so Yemen during the genocide imposed a naval blockade, saying any Israeli ships going through, we will attack them. And more recently, because Israel's not letting humanitarian aid into Gaza, which is desperately needed, Yemen has reopened this and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So in response, Trump bombs Yemen. And I saw one of his disgusting ignoramus remarks. I can't remember what it was, but it was about Yemen. It was basically saying, like, I think it was like, Houthis will not be allowed under Trump, or some crap like that. First of all, it's Ansar Allah. Houthis are not the name the Yemeni resistance go by. But aside from that, it's just like, America, okay, it was Biden at the time, gave Israel the bombs and the money to decimate and destroy and murder Palestinians in Gaza and destroy Gaza. And Trump can say, well, that wasn't me. But now he's still continuing the Zionist project, supporting, of course, 100% of Israel, and now going after the only people that really stood with Palestinians. I don't want to say the only, because Hezbollah and Syria, before Assad was toppled, stood with Palestinians. In fact, Syria was a long-time supporter to Palestinian resistance. And anyway, that's an aside. But yeah, so I know that many, I should say, public figures before Trump was elected, they were, you would have people commenting like, he's not our savior. It's going to be the same thing with a different face. And people, I'm sure you got your earful of this, would be like, no, he's really going to clean things up. Like you said, he's going to end corruption. There's not going to be any more of this. Oh, well, what about the fact that all of the people in his government are Zionist? Well, everybody's a Zionist, so it doesn't matter, or Tulsi Gabbard, for example. oh well, no, she's good. She was good on Syria. No, no, she wasn't good on Syria. She literally accused Assad of gassing his own people. And it just I mean, I don't actually, to be honest, follow US politics that closely because it's just a circus or shit show. But I am aware of some of these characters, and I am aware of certain again, public figures who were very much pro-Palestine for a while, and then they're like, okay, burgers with Bobby Kennedy's RFK Jr. is gonna save America. Trump, Elon are gonna save America, and like, yeah, it's just immensely frustrating. Again, because you've come back to the issue of these grifters who come upon an issue, whether, for example, Palestine, and for a short period are like in defense of Palestine, and then later go on and say, well, it's the Palestinians' fault themselves. It's just like, and they're the ones supporting Trump. And so to them, for whatever reason, I don't think they actually believe Trump is our savior. I'm sorry. I think they're selfish. I think it's self-motivation. I think it's for pushing their own stuff for clout. And I suppose there are some that actually believe Trump is going to clean everything up and make everything great again, but they're delusional.
The previous administration could not make a dent in Yemen. What would be different about this now?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose, and I can't confirm whether it's true, but I did read that Trump used, um, excuse me, bunker buster bombs in Yemen last night, which are massive, the kind that Israel was using in Gaza and in Beirut that create massive destruction. So if that's true, and if he was to continue doing this to Yemen, well, that would be different than Biden's administration did, or the people behind Biden, rather. But I don't know. I actually don't know how far Trump will go with this because I don't know. I mean, I you just have to think that I don't know. I'm kind of stuttering here. That would be too much. If it's a one-off, somehow the international so-called community will accept it. But if it's continuous, I don't know. But look what they did to Gaza. So I really don't know what the answer is.
Well, and the only reason I'm asking that, I mean, I remember seeing a video from last year with Sal Mercogliano, who's a merchant marine professor in the United States, and so shipping. He does a lot of, got a big YouTube channel in regards to shipping, which is really funny because I've had him on a bunch now, and his channel just blew up throughout the course of our conversations. And I said, when you started this, people probably said to you, who's ever going to want to watch a show about shipping? Like, who would ever thought? He goes, yeah, I know. It's crazy. Now I'm getting hundreds of thousands of views on all my stuff. But he had a video that was sent to him where there was a drone boat, and it was going towards one of these oil shippers. And they were trying to shoot it, with assault weapons to blow this thing up. And it was like, wow, this is the state of war today. You have these little drone boats that you can just send in. And I don't know how, I have to find it and send it to you, but, 2,000-pound bombs that you're going to drop in Yemen, you can't stop those drone boats from just, sending 5 of them or 10 of them at the ships through the Red Sea.
Interesting.
Hey, you never saw that video?
No.
Oh, it was amazing. Like you had like 3 or 4 guys on this carrier, this oil ship, shooting at this little drone boat like that's coming in, and they're trying to blow it up before it makes contact with the big ship. So
Not to change the subject, but when you mentioned drone, I had said to you before we started recording that I want to mention the drone attack that occurred some days ago. I forgot what day. It was like, I think 350 drones or so, Ukrainian drones, I'm sorry, were sent to different regions of Russia. I don't have my phone with me, so I can't easily look up the stats, but I think in the Moscow region, anyway, I believe overall 343 were shot down. I woke up to the sound of air defense shooting down drones that were in my region. I woke up around 5 a.m. and that went on till well after dawn. So well after, I think it was after 7 a.m., there were still drones being shot down. And then, so these were drones supplied to Ukraine. I'm not saying Trump did that, but maybe you can speak to, because Trump did say they were going to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, correct? And then later said, well, I don't know what he said, but later it was made clear they've either resumed sending weapons or they never stopped in the first place.
Yeah, and I've read those too. He's been adamant how he wants this to stop. He wants it. It's interesting to me the contradictory between the Middle East. You don't want the bullets to stop over there, but you want the bullets to stop in Russia, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Which again, nobody's going to ask him that if in the briefing room. But yeah, he had mentioned that he wants the bullets to stop. That Ukraine has been decimated, it's been destroyed. The war needs to end. You saw that. You saw Zelensky coming in to D.C. and the whole thing. You saw that whole video where they were yelling back and forth. But then I like to what you just said. I've read where the supplies are still continuing to go to Ukraine, and then you're also reading about Europe, how Europe is in full support of Ukraine, and they're going to somehow raise capital, raise money, and send equipment, whatever they need to continue this.
Yeah.
I don't know how they can do that. I mean, without the United States, I don't know how they have the means to send those resources, but it's very clear they do not want this to. They want this to continue.
Yeah, I was listening to was it? I like to listen to Judge Napolitano,
Napolitano.
I think.
Yeah, Napolitano.
Yeah. When he has Alistair Crook on, especially because I enjoy listening to his analysis. But I think it was now correct me, is it Larry Wilkerson or something like that?
Colonel Larry Wilkerson or Larry Johnson?
Yeah. No, I know Larry Johnson. So it was Wilkerson. I think it was his interview I was listening to the other day, and he was I don't remember who he was citing, but he was citing some in Europe saying that they want the war to continue to 2029 or 2030, and basically saying peace is not profitable. Ukraine doesn't need peace; it needs war. Something like that. It was quite interesting. I haven't looked that up, but who might have said that? But if that's a mentality, that's outrageous. Because, I mean, I'm laughing in a kind of what's the word? Not surprised, but just disgusted way, because those of us who speak about how and why the special military operation came about, or the 8 years of Ukraine's war on the Donbass prior to 2022, the media, because I have been smeared, I don't really care about that. I'm just making a point. We will be smeared as Russian propagandists, right? And with those smears, they'll say like, oh, you don't care about Ukrainian lives. Well, actually, you're the ones that don't care about Ukrainian lives if you want to prolong the war. I mean, it's crystal clear.
People, and I'm talking about regular people here. I mean, how much I saw on my personal Facebook. In fact, I put something up saying I said something like I don't stand with Ukraine, or said something, whatever I wrote, and man, I got people were just hating. Oh, you want Putin to invade, you want Putin to go to Europe, and it's like, okay, so you want this war to continue? You want more people to die? I want it all to stop.
Right.
I'm being consistent here across the board. I want it all to stop. I mean, my father was 100% Lebanese. Beirut has been devastated by all this. Now I'm an American, and I've never been there, but still, I mean, I want it all to stop. So, with Ukraine, it's why is this continuing? What is, they're not going to defeat Russia.
No.
And
no, it's madness.
And what does Putin want? I mean, I don't know him. I mean, doesn't appear that he wants to invade Europe.
No, that's just idiotic Western rhetoric to justify their stance. No, he made very clear not only in 2022, before then, years before then, and since then, he's made very clear, and it's never been about invading Europe or taking all of Ukraine, but that kind of rhetoric is necessary. When I was speaking about Syria and Western media and their demonization of Assad, and also before that Gaddafi, and after that, and now Putin, that is one of the main things they need to do. They need to paint such a demonic picture of whatever leader, to the general public, because the general public are inundated with it, because that trope is going out through everything, through media, through talk shows, through comedy shows, because, you know, they always pick up on it and they'll be like, hey, did you know everyone in North Korea has to have the same haircut as Kim Jong-un? Like, for example, or for example, I actually did, I think I told you about this. I did go back to see my mom in February last year because it had been 4 years and I missed her and I missed my brothers. And I was a little bit concerned that because the Canadian government is becoming more fascist and they're huge supporters of Ukraine, huge supporters of Israel. They supported the terrorists in Syria. They whitewashed their crimes. But, you know, the climate in Canada, I know it's worse in the UK and Europe for journalists or public figures or whatever. So it was on my mind that going back to Canada, I could be arrested. Not that I've done anything criminal, but, you know, reporting on Ukraine's war crimes could be in their mind criminal, you know, or living in Russia. So it occurred, I was going back to Canada with that in mind, like, okay, I don't want to be stuck in Canada. I like living in Russia. I like the people here. They're very kind, very informed and intelligent. I like life in Russia. And I haven't done anything wrong, but our governments are so screwed up that they could throw me in prison. So that was on my mind. And I didn't bring my computer with me. I cleaned my phone, not that I had anything incriminating, but I didn't want to give them any more information than they might have. And they did go through my luggage. They did search every item. They asked me questions about every freaking item in my suitcase. They asked all sorts of questions, and then they said, CSIS wants to talk to you. It's voluntary, but I figured, well, if I don't talk to them at the airport, then they will come to my home, my family, I should say. So I spoke with the CSIS dude for 20 minutes, and he asked a number of stupid questions. I'm sorry, this is a very long-winded point being, what was my point now? I lost my train of thought. Okay, going back to see, so I got through that process, thankfully. And the CSIS guy did come at me when I was leaving 2 weeks later. But anyway, the point being, I was in a public environment and I heard someone say some derogatory comment about Russians, right? And I was visiting my mom. And so I went and said, why did you say that? And he's like, I said, how you know that exactly how? Have you met Russians? Have you been to Russia? And he's like, are you just 20 something or whatever? He's like, oh, no, it's just something. I just said it. It's just something I heard. I'm like, well, you're actually very ignorant and uninformed. I live in Russia. And what you've just said is so out of reality that you look like a fool, something like that. He actually came up to me a couple of days later and apologized. He said, I'm sorry. I just heard that. So that was a really long-winded way of trying to say this misinformation or this cartoonish portrayal of people, whether it's Putin, Assad, Gaddafi, Kim Jong-un, myself, not that I'm on any of their level, but what I mean is it's so inundated, not only in the media, because this young dude probably doesn't watch news. He didn't strike me as particularly intelligent, but he heard it somewhere. So, you know, TV show, movie, talk show. It's just like people are just, they say things back to what you're saying. They attack you. They don't even really know what they're standing for. They're just saying an impulse thing that they've had thrown at them on Facebook or on all these different platforms a million times. So they've absorbed it. And so now you look like the crazy person for saying I don't stand with Ukraine, even though you have your reasons, valid ones.
Well, and I think too, I mean, for my experience with the people that I'm seeing post that stuff is they live in not all of them, but they live in very safe little suburbs, right? Where bad things don't happen. I call it the blissfully, taking it from a line from somebody else, but the blissfully unaware, because it's not touching you. So, and I'm not saying where I live it's touching me either. I mean, to a certain extent, a little bit, being Arizona on the border, but, and we have a homeless population that just continues to grow here. So, I mean, I'm seeing a little more than, say, Northeast Ohio, where I grew up. But people are so blissfully unaware, and they just grab onto this propaganda, and they're like, "Oh, I stand with Ukraine," or, you know. But yeah, your trip to Canada last year, because we talked about that before, it makes me.
I was telling him like, "Oh, I'm repeating
No,
myself."
because you know, I'm glad you did, because you know it drives me to another point of where I think ultimately all this is going, because you were coming into Canada there was obviously some type of alert or trigger saying that you were
Yeah.
coming through, that somebody had, they were ready, that somebody
Yep.
was allocated to you. And I forget, when you were leaving Canada to come back home, didn't they get you again?
Yeah. So I entered on my US passport because my Canadian was expired. And I did not know. Apparently, I could have entered on my Canadian. I guess so. I guess the way it works is you can enter even if it's expired, but you just can't leave on it. So now I know. But I entered on my US passport, and I was flagged, and all that questioning process I told you about. And at some point during that questioning before the CSIS guy, I said to the young man, he was nice enough, and I just like, hey, why did you pull me aside? And he said, because you'd been out of the country so long. But when I first presented my passport, it was the US one, right? And he asked me a few questions, and I said, oh, well, I came back here to see my mom. And he's like, back? Did you live here? I'm like, yeah, I lived here until 2020. So with that in mind, first interaction, he says, oh, he's surprised that I'm Canadian, right? Because I have my US passport. But later on, he says, yeah, because you were out of the country so long is why they pulled me aside. It's a contradictory, right?
So they knew, yeah. So they
Yeah.
were able to get the intelligence, and yeah. Well, and that's
Yeah.
where.
But
Oh, go ahead.
then it was roughly 2 weeks later. I had a I don't know, like 11 or 12 midnight flight. And so a little bit tired, and standing in line to board. And then the little CSIS guy that had questioned me says, hi, Eva. And I kind of look at him like it took me a second. I'm like, oh, it's you. Because going through, I didn't know if they're going to take my phone. I didn't know if they're going to prevent me from leaving the airport. So I was biting my tongue a lot with the stupid questions they're asking me. He was asking me because I didn't want to be cheeky and I didn't want to be, held back or whatever. I didn't know what they were going to do, really. I didn't know if they were going to arrest me or something. But leaving, I was just like, okay, well, I'm leaving now, so screw you. And I just said to him, he said, like, we're here to protect you. And I just said, like, you're literally arming Nazis in Ukraine. You're not here to protect me. And he left after that. So, yeah,
Well, and I think that ultimately where this is all going, as long as technology continues to advance the way it is, and it's advancing at an accelerated rate right now with AI
hmm
and everything else, it's inevitable in Western civilization. I mean, we're all going to be under digital control on a CB. I mean, we already are on a CBDC, basically. I mean, you'd use your phone for everything.
yeah,
And if people don't think they're going to take full advantage of that and debank you, I mean they've already debanked people, or make it so you can't travel, or this app doesn't work, or the phone is inoperable,
yeah,
or whatnot. I mean, people are naive.
yeah.
Can't stop it at this point, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't, I mean, I agree with you. But I think it is happening globally. I don't know if each country that is implementing these things is using the technology for the same purposes. Like it exists here, but whether they're using it for the same purpose as in the West, I don't know. Um, but yeah, you can't stop it.
I mean, the United States
I
have.
mean,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just think most people aren't in the position where they can afford to go somewhere rural and try to live off the grid. Unfortunately, most people can't do that. If they can, that's great. Even then, though, like, I suppose there will be a time if you're living off grid, even then, where you won't be allowed to. They'll change the rules about land use or whatever, property ownership.
Or the Wi-Fi or the net. They'll be able to extend Wi-Fi or Starlink to even the most remote of remote areas if they can't, if they maybe they can already.
Mm,
So, but I also think though as well. I mean, what we're doing as individuals is the best that we can do, because whatever happens at that top level, I can't stop that.
yeah.
But it's bringing awareness and bringing these types of conversations to people. I mean, I think that's the best that we can do right now.
Yeah, I mean, coming full circle to how we started, um, I feel like um not that it's futile, like what's happening in Syria. I don't want to use the word futile, but it is in a sense hopeless because I don't feel there's any body that will stop the terrorism and the slaughter of civilians there. And yet I'm compelled to at least talk about it and post about it. Will that change things? probably not, but I can't sit there and not talk about it. And the other aspect is from the civilians' side there, they feel completely abandoned. They feel they are completely surrounded. And as I've already said multiple times, they're crying out for help. Again, me posting on Facebook or doing an interview or writing about it, tragically, is not going to change their situation. But at least they feel, when they know people are talking about it, at least they feel they're being heard, which is, better than feeling, because back years ago when I lived in Gaza, from 2008 to 2010, then 2011 to 2013, we didn't have the technology we have now. Back then I had, I don't know, a Nokia mobile, not a smartphone, and had to, actually go to a place with internet to upload anything. It was a struggle to get information out. So the reason I bring that up is I remember during the 2008, 2009 Israeli war in Gaza, it was hard to keep in touch with people in Gaza itself. But there was this feeling like we can't get our voices out to the outside world, because the only way I could get any information out was to go to one particular media building that still had both a generator and internet. Otherwise, I couldn't from anywhere else share what I was seeing in northern Gaza. But I remember that the feeling Palestinians, they would say to me, like, we just want people to hear our voices. Like, even if that didn't change anything, it's just, I don't know. I suppose for people who've never been in such a situation, I don't know what the analogy would be. Well, okay, maybe you've been kidnapped or something and you're locked in a room. And if there's somebody who can hear you, there's at least hope, right? But if not, you just feel like I'm locked in this room. I'm going to die. And that's how, well, that is their reality. So I guess it's a mixed kind of statement there, because on the one hand, us talking about what they're going through, this ethnic cleansing, isn't stopping it. But maybe there's a trickle effect where it reaches somebody who talks about it. I don't know. That's naive and optimistic, I suppose. But basically, coming back to what I've already said, it's a compulsion to speak about the different things we're speaking about, because not speaking about it isn't an option.
No, well, I think the work you're doing is so important, and I'm thankful for people like yourself and others that are willing to sacrifice so much to get this information out. And this is why I always enjoy talking to you. Last question that I have is, maybe I asked you this before. You doing all this for as long as you have been now. You understand, well, you understand the risks that you've put yourself in physically, mentally. Have you ever, I mean, I don't know how to word this. You're willing to sacrifice everything to get this information out. Have you ever like thought to yourself like you could die covering this story
Oh,
or
yeah.
reporting this?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is,
It's not the
and
way
I'm
I
going to
wanted to
say,
ask it. I couldn't think how to ask it properly.
no, it's okay. I basically faced, okay, I'm not, how to say this without sounding like a pompous ass, but because I started in Palestine 8 months in the West Bank in 2007, and there were scary incidents with the Israeli army and illegal colonists there.
Because you were in the
Um,
ambulance and stuff when it was getting shot at.
well, that was in 2008 in Gaza. Well, actually, the end of 2008, the war started, and that ambulance incident was in January 2009. Yeah, it was it was during supposed ceasefire hours, like 2 or 3 hours, which was supposed to be humanitarian ceasefire. Um, Palestinian medics were in their uniforms, and they drove up to a crossroads where there was a body lying there. They were going to evacuate the body. The medics got out. I was still in the ambulance. They told us to stay, me and one other activist. And they walked up to the body, they put it on a stretcher, and they started walking away. And an Israeli sniper started firing at them. And they still ran with the stretcher. And these medics there are heroes, until ultimately they had to drop and run for their lives. And thankfully, they did live. One was shot in the leg, but the bullets reached up to the back of the ambulance, and the ambulance was legging it out of there. So I mean, but that was one of many incidents. I mean, the work we did with farmers, we were constantly being shot at by the Israeli army. People say, oh, those are just warning shots. Well, my interpretation of warning shots is firing into the air. They were firing at our bodies, perhaps intentionally missing. They were trying to intimidate us to not be on the land and see what they do to Palestinian farmers or other people on the land, which is maim and kill them. But we were there to be in solidarity with the farmers. Um, but yeah, many instances, random Israeli bombings near the house I was living in. I mean, basically what I should say is that because I started in the West Bank and then in Gaza, again, many close calls in Gaza, but then that was the most, for me, the most extreme, because not to compare to other conflicts, but why for me it was the most extreme was that it's such a small place. Nobody had body armor. I never had body armor till I went to the Donbass. Um, and there was every conceivable war machine around or above you. And again, um, media blockage, so they can do whatever the hell they want, slaughter who and however they want. And so that was like something we came to terms with very early on. And you come to terms with the fact that, yeah, if I go there, I'm going to die. I could die, I should say. I could be shot. I could be bombed, whatever. But then it's just like, well, everybody's in that situation. So just get on with it, you know? So I think because that's where I started, then when I was in dangerous places in Syria or in the Donbass, like in Syria, there were two occasions when terrorist snipers fired in the direction where I was. I'm not saying they were targeting me per se, but the one occasion in 2014, terrorists in eastern Ghouta fired towards the old city, and I was just standing alongside a wall outside the old city, and the bullets flew by really close, and everybody that was with me screamed and ran. And another time, I forget, I think 2016, going through a district of Damascus where there was a truce with the local factions. They were still armed with light arms, but they had pledged not to attack the Syrian army anymore. But they had arms to defend themselves from other terrorists. We were driving through there, and I asked the driver was actually a soldier. Many soldiers in Syria would have a second job because they got paid so little. So this guy was a soldier, and the person with him was his cousin, and he was with me as a translator. Even though I speak Arabic, I like it to be, perfect. Anyway, I asked them, can I take photos here? Because I have learned to ask before I start photographing. They said yes, but be discreet. So I took it wasn't my mobile, it was like an actual camera, and I just discreetly went like that. And shortly after, someone spotted us, or maybe it was coincidental, but shots fired out at our car. And I didn't know. I thought it was maybe like exhaust or a flat tire, but the driver said no, that was sniper fire. Anyway, that was just a couple of incidents. There are many other occasions where being in very close proximity with the terrorists, it could have gone bad. But back to my original point, like starting in Gaza, basically, and then going to Syria or the Donbass, you've already come to terms with the fact that, yeah, you could be maimed, you could be killed. When I used to walk with the farmers, I actually started putting my hands behind my head because I was like, if you're going to kill me, you're going to kill me, but I don't want you shooting my hands because I need my fingers, which is, I know, really dark, but yeah, that's just how it is.
Is it, all right, I lied. One last question. You got time for one more question, Eva? Based on all your experiences and, being shot at, do you treat, when you go into a hot zone now the same, or do you hesitate at all?
No. Let me see. So in the Donbass, so throughout 2022, I was there off and on. I might have said this to you previously, but for people who don't know, I would have stayed, but by that point, I'd already adopted two dogs, and they're my family, part of my family. And so I would go there for 3 weeks, come back here for a month, go there for 3 weeks, come back for a month. So that was throughout 2022 from April on. And that was a really hard year because of the Ukrainian shelling, although it started in 2014. 2022, it was really heavy, particularly all over, but in Donetsk, very heavy, in Gorlivka, other areas. And so it was extremely dangerous to be there because you never knew when the shelling would start, and they were using extremely accurate munitions, NATO weaponry. So, for example, in August, when the hotel I was in was, I can't say it was bombed. Let's see. The bombing started 200 meters away and came up to the edge of the hotel. The last two shells hitting like 10 meters away and then directly next to the hotel, killing a woman on the sidewalk and blowing the windows in. And so after that and bombings in June, we all became more wary, like, okay, if you're going to go out in the streets, nobody told me. I just started intuitively thinking I should walk on this side of the street because if a shelling occurs, it'll be coming from this direction. So the chance of me being impacted by shrapnel is less than if I was standing on this side, right? So I started intuitively thinking like, okay, which way's the safest place? So I didn't stop walking, and that's how I got around in Donetsk, was walking. I didn't take taxis or anything unless in an absolute hurry. So basically, to your question, it didn't make me hesitate in going out. I just tried to be smarter about how I was moving around. And like when that bombing outside the hotel happened, I was actually sitting. I didn't usually stay in hotels. I usually rented a small, cheap, less expensive apartment, which is more discreet. But at that particular time, I wanted to be near the other journalists because I didn't have wheels. So I thought if something happens, I can go with them. And so when that August hotel next to the hotel bombings happened, I had been in the lobby, which got blown out 10 minutes prior. I left it, went up to my then room, which was facing the direction where the bombs came from. And after the second or third blast, I was like, I should probably leave this room because they're getting closer. So it's just like another example of how you start to think, okay, well, you start to be smart about how you if I stayed in that room, actually the window was blown out. So if I stayed, I wouldn't have been killed, but I could have had glass in my face or whatever. Anyway, that's a really long-winded answer. But no, I can't speak for everyone. I think for whatever reason, my reaction to that kind of situation, I I realized it when I lived in Gaza because we'd be with the farmers, and when the shots ring out, your instinct is to duck. But for whatever reason, my body was able to remain calm, and I would just stand my ground, even though it was pretty scary to have bullets whizzing by. But it was just the way my body reacted. Other people, my friend, he was very courageous, but his instinct was to always duck. But he was courageous because he was there, putting himself, in the line of fire. But his body instinct was to duck. So it's just, I don't know if it's physiology or what, but that's your answer.
Incredible, incredible. Where can people find you, Eva?
Okay, I'm on X, Eva K. Bartlett, but I have a decent amount of followers, but people don't see me. So if you want to retweet me on X, that would actually help because most people don't even see my tweets. I'm on Telegram, Eva. What am I on Telegram?
I got it
Eva
right
K.
here,
Bartlett
actually.
Reality Theories, and I'm on Facebook still. I actually boycotted it for a while, but I went back because it is a platform and I have a decent following. So Eva Korean Bartlett on Facebook, and my blog is ingaza.wordpress.com.
And your Substack.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I did start a Substack. I finally started using it recently. So it should be Eva Korean Bartlett on Substack.
Where can people donate to you?
I just have the one option so far. You can donate via PayPal, and that you can find that on my blog on the right-hand side. There's a fairly small donate button, but it does work. I will probably at one point get one of the buy me a coffee type things, but I haven't done that yet.
And Substack they can subscribe to? You could accept.
I haven't even tried to monetize it. Like, I just wanted to get the information out, so they can subscribe for sure. I guess I should try to monetize that and use that as a means of generating income, but I've just never been terribly financially minded, as my brother can attest. So, yeah, but I think that I will get on that then.
For people that are listening to this, I mean, Eva's been on here several times, and we spent the last hour talking about her experiences and the work that she's doing and how she risks her life and has been doing it for a very, very long time in order to get information out to people, so they can can make an accurate assessment of what's going on. Please donate to her. She's independent and she works extremely hard. And I think if you have the financial means to contribute, you should, because she's out there every single day, working extremely, working her ass off, if I can say.
Thank you so much.
As always, Eva, I enjoy our conversations. Thank you for everything you do, and I look forward to the next one.
Okay, well, I will. I might have something to talk about in a couple of months, so I will ding you, ping you, whatever, and we can have another conversation. But yeah, thanks for having me back on.
I look forward to it. Mic drop.